Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on how to prepare a transfer pricing local file in 60 minutes by Aibidia. While everyone talks about new international tax reforms, implementation of public CBCR, other interesting topics, it's good to remember that tax teams still spend around 70% of their time on basic compliance activities, such as preparation of transfer pricing local files. That's why we decided to gather today with Isabella to talk about how teams can save time, reduce costs, and enhance control over their transfer pricing processes. The webinar's name tells that it is possible to prepare a transfer pricing local file in 60 minutes, and we really mean it. And today we will discuss a set of measures that you and your team can take to achieve this efficiency, as well as the pros and cons of automation. Let's start with the introduction. So my name is Boris Olanenko, and I'm a digital transfer pricing advisor at Aibidia. I'm also a founder of Arm's Length AI, the first AI company in transfer pricing. And today with me, Isabella. Isabella, can you please tell us a couple of words about yourself?
Hello, I am Isabella, Senior Manager Tax by Textile Fashion Group. One of my biggest responsibilities is exactly transfer price documentation, transfer price calculation. And our company is a fashion group, as the name is already saying. And we are like worldwide online retailer.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Isabella. And we will talk a little bit more about your setup and how you currently deal with transfer pricing documentation throughout this webinar. And the main reason why we invited Isabella is indeed to have this in-house perspective to automation of local files. So what are we going to talk about today? We will start with a fundamental question. Why you even should consider automating local files? Because the answer to this question is not obvious. Every automation has its pros and cons, and we will talk about it too. We have also created some resources to help you navigate this journey, and we will mention them in our conversation. I will then give you a short demo on how you can actually do this, automate your local files, and prepare them later on using Aibidia. Then we will talk about other problems beyond transfer pricing local files that could be the next steps in the automation journey when we are talking about transfer pricing. And at the end, we will also finish with the Q&A session. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please use chat box. Please provide your questions, and we will answer them at the end of our session, or we will be answering them in text during the session. So let's dive right in. I will close our slides because we don't need them anymore. So Isabella, you already told us a little bit about textile, but can you also tell us a little bit about your transfer pricing documentation process before you even considered automation? How were you preparing your documentation before?
So our company is structured from 4 different brands that includes many of subsidiaries. And our process to create local files till the Aibidia, was like our tax advisor that was responsible for transfer price documentation, roll forward our old transfer price documentation, the previous year one, and send it out to us to review. On our side, I needed to prepare like template with actual numbers for the current year, and that were integrated into the transfer price documentation. And it was like back and forth, like, do you know this game ping pong? So they sent me a file to review it. I needed to go file by file, document by document, checking, and everything is fine if there are some adjustment needed, and then send it back. And this took a lot of time, a lot of effort, and on my end, on their end, and it was like constant reviewing all the files, comparing to the previous version, and it was like it was a lot of effort on both sides, a lot of cost producing for the tax advisor cost on my side, as I am also paid for my time, so it was cost created on both sides that are actually not needed nowadays.
Great. Interesting. And were you using one advisory firm to help you, or were you using several ones?
So luckily for our proposals, we had like one worldwide bigger advisor company that was also settled locally. So for I had only one person to talk to, but the local files were always prepared by the local advisors. Send it out to the main person and then send it out to me. So the way was always like really long.
Okay. So a lot of friction along the way to communicate everything.
Yes.
Okay. And so you mentioned that this back and forth in time was one of the reasons you considered automating your local file preparation. Were there anything else, and what benefits did you expect to receive from the automation?
So definitely by in-housing of the transfer price documentation, the first and most important is the ownership over the whole process. Also time saving, as this sending back and forth, me reviewing constantly almost the same files, and for each country separately, took a lot of time on my side, took a lot of time on the side of the tax advisors. Also, as I said, what is not unimportant, cost saving. As let be honest, tax advisors are not exactly the most cheapest part of the whole process. My cost on my end also not. So it was like making everything in-house, making everything simple, having everything match to each other. So I didn't need to like check, okay, does the German tax local file match to what we say in the Spanish one or in the UK one, and is it also exactly the same story told in the master file? So this comparing of different kind of local files was also like the difficulty that I was hoping to solve with Aibidia. So having the same story in all documents without a lot of effort to reviewing and checking and comparing.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's exactly why many companies do consider automation. And so, do you have any while you were considering the automation and preparing a business case for it? Because I guess you had to go to your internal stakeholders and convince them that, well, doing it the old way is not the best option, and you want now to move to the digitalization or to digitalize it with a more specialized solution like Aibidia. Were you doing the actual calculations of like how much time you're going to save or how much money you spend currently on the advisors? Was that part of your business case?
Definitely. So I needed to prepare, like you said, a business case, comparing the time saving, the cost saving, also like future beneficence of Aibidia, as I think this platform have a possibility to develop further, not only within of transfer price documentation, but also going further. There is way more behind except of transfer pricing, like CBCR, like pillar 2, pillar 1. So everything this hoping to have like one solution in one platform and not trying to consolidate everything separately.
Mm-hmm.
So all those benefits of automatization, also like possibility to in the future not having an Excel template that I need to provide to the tax advisor, but like matching our P&L with Aibidia and with push the button, just pulling the data and having everything there only needed to be reviewed. Like I am reviewing text boxes with that goes to local file, that goes to master file, and having everything prepared at once.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, of course. And we typically hear that companies are preparing their business cases, and while the focus is obviously on the time and cost saving for problems like TP documentation, there are indeed a lot of other benefits that you could get if you're using one platform for all of your, or well, at least like major part of your transfer pricing and tax processes. And when you were considering automation and moving to doing local files in Aibidia platform, Did you have any particular concerns, or did you identify any downsides of that decision comparing to like doing it using advisors?
So there are also like concerns, as the taking over the ownership means also like being actually responsible for all compliance, all taxes, all everything what is included in the transfer price documentation, and this is a huge responsibility. We need to be honest with each other. So my biggest concern was, am I able to like deal with this huge responsibility? And honestly, the answer was yes, as I am not the only one that will be responsible. So our approach by automating and in-housing the tax transfer price documentation was, I would prepare the local file, having them set it up, and then having our tax advisor that was for now doing exactly this job, having them doing what they're supposed to be, being advisor. So having the final review, having like one more time checking. So they have like access to our Aibidia platform, and they can just log in, check everything, review everything, make them comments or change automatically. And then I am sure that my compliance is on stage and everything is fine.
That makes a lot of sense. So you essentially also automate a part of their work by moving it in-house, right? And then you just focus on the most value-adding activities, both from your perspective, like where you add value by knowing the structure of the group, knowing the businesses, probably knowing the stakeholders, because still you obviously need to coordinate a lot in internal activities to get everything done. But also them are focusing on what they know the best, like local tax regulations, more specific and more technical knowledge on transfer pricing, while this all data gathering and then generating documentation is something that is handled by the technology.
Exactly.
All right.
So what I also can say to it is, like, sometimes the wording, as we are operating in English and English is not my mother language, is also like trying to, sometimes it's only like the sentence needs to be rewrite. So not only like the new tax requirement or any legislation issue. So it's sometimes only like rewriting the words, the sentences also. So this is like something that they also need to do. But it's like getting them in the advisor role, back in the advisor role, and not doing the junior stuff that everyone can do, like roll forward a document.
Yes, exactly. And I think it is probably also still comforting for you to still involve advisors to some degree, just because like you are the only one almost accountable for this in your company, and it's a lot to handle. I think for one person to just be responsible for everything end to end, and having a second eye review and having someone there still makes sense, but obviously that would be probably like only 20% of what they were doing in terms of time and costs, comparing to what they've done before.
Definitely.
Great. And you mentioned about languages, and I think that naturally leads us to the point of localization and complying with local requirements. Can you tell us a little bit about that part too? So what's your current approach on making sure that it complies locally? How do you handle this? And at what point of time, basically, do you care about that?
So our headquarters is based in LA in USA. So our company language is English. So all the required documents are prepared naturally in English language. So all local files, all master files are in English language. Our compliance to comply with the local requirements, like for example, having a transfer price documentation in the respective language, is as follow. We are preparing on time our local files. So as you said, I am preparing everything on the date where the financial statements are due. And then if it's needed, if the tax authorities requires our local file, then we send it over in English. As in nowadays, everything is also in English available. And if they still require like local language, then we have always a translator that gets the local file and translated within a few days. So it's not an issue to have it like translated into Spanish, into German, or other languages from countries where we're operating.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's our general advice to most of the companies who we're talking to. So our view is that the main part of your transfer pricing compliance is having relevant data in the right moment of time, and then generating the actual local file is just a push of the button then. And then the same about local compliance, right? If there are countries where you actually have to submit documentation, that's one story. That's where you need to generate it, you need to submit it. And then if it's like locally required, though of course we have some features which help you localize your documentation, that's the moment of time when you will actually do it, when it's actually required by tax authorities or required to be submitted. But normally, I think like the modern approach to it is to have all the data organized, well structured, controlled on the platform, and then generate documentation only when it is actually needed. Though, of course, there are companies which just prefer to have everything generated on their SharePoint, which is also fine. That's not something that, and it's just like much easier. I think like that resembles a little bit of old approach, right? When your advisors and you were creating file, and then you have those set of files. But then what if you, let's say, discovered you need to change one thing? You need to change it in the platform, but then you need to regenerate all the files. And then why would you do that if you could just like store that all on the platform and only generate when it is required? So there are pros and cons of both approaches. And do you have, you mentioned data gathering and information gathering. I think like in this new world of automation, this is the role, this becomes a even more important role for in-house team, right? Because you're on top of the company data. Can you tell us a little bit about that part? So how are you currently doing gathering information from your internal stakeholders or source systems, and how do you see this evolving over time?
So our old approach was that I had few data points, so few stakeholders that I needed to contact every time I wanted to prepare local files to get the information I needed, and then rewrite it, partly adjust it to our template, and then forward it to the tax advisor. The next approach with Aibidia will be like having my stakeholders having access, like limited access to the platform, and having them putting that the data already in a template or in the way how I wanted to have them. So it will automate it. It will like make my life easier, and really the whole future, maybe the next step in the next year will be like having like some connection points where I can just pull everything from my system to the Aibidia and not even asking for data from external colleagues. So this is the highest level of automatization that I am expecting to achieve next year.
Yeah, and this makes a lot of sense, especially. So I think like when we start this project of, or when we got new customers, we always try to identify which of data points are the ones that require direct integration and what are the data points which are not updated too often. And then we're building more intense automation around those which are either there is a really lot of data, or this data needs to be uploaded really frequently, right? Like especially when we're talking about operational transfer pricing problems, that's where you have this monthly process or even sometimes weekly process, and you need to pull this data all the time. And then someone like an employee or a human going there, extracting the data and putting it in the system, maybe not the best approach. And there the automation makes sense. But let's say if we're talking about something like company data, right? Like list of your companies. If your group is really growing and expanding and updating every month, then that's one story. And then building automation around synchronization is indeed valuable at any point of time. But if your group is rather stable and you have like one extra legal entity per year, then probably building a direct integration is not something that is like you would be high on the priority list, obviously. So we primarily talk about this financial data, like list of transactions, amounts, and P&L, if that's something that is used in TP policies, and that's where we build automation. But our longer term strategy is to have all the data connected, obviously. It's just that you need to prioritize things accordingly.
Exactly. So first, get the data automated that you use on daily, weekly, monthly basis, and then move it from there to have on some point the whole, as you said, the whole system, the whole process automated. So first make your life as easy as possible, and then move it from there.
Yeah, exactly. Isabella, do you have any particular advice to people who will be considering automation? Like, how would you suggest approaching it? Maybe there were some learnings along the way that you want to share with other colleagues of your like in-house teams.
So my experience around the automatization is, first, don't be afraid of automatization. It's something good. Search yourself a partner that knows how to support the process, the whole process. Like the IT team from Aibidia was really a huge support by automatization process. So have like templates that try to standardize as much as possible, clean up your P&L, for example. Have like make yourself few thoughts, what's the final result, what you want to automate, in which scale you want to automate, who needs to be included, and then, as I said, try to have the support that is needed, and just start to do it. So there is no better point as now to automate tax.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. And you mentioned that the consideration and researching all the alternatives and all of the options that are currently available. So I think like when we spoke with you before, you mentioned also that in parallel with Aibidia, you were also considering other options for automation. What made Aibidia stand out? Why did you decide to go with Aibidia?
So as every company, we are always like having first a look on all the solutions that are available on the market, and we did have some other solutions that we had a closer look at, and honestly, the majority of the solution for transfer price documentation, for Pillar 2, for CBCR are like Excel based. And nothing against Excel, but me personally, I have like love-hate experience with Excel. It's like really a lot of errors that are possible. You need to update those files. The files are always huge. There are some connection, and if you have like one error at the beginning, it's like cascade. So it's like looking for a needle in a straw. So, and that's why our perfect fit was a platform that provides everything, like provides transfer price, provides operating transfer price transfer price documentation, CBCR, Pillar 2, to have like everything in one, to have everything telling the same story as the tax authorities are comparing nowadays. There are a huge data monster that compares all the data that they collect from different sizes, from different sites, sorry, not sizes, different sites, from different reports that we need to provide. And then if something doesn't match, they come to you. So that's why Aibidia was, for me, the perfect match, as it provides a lot. It minimizes Excel file work to really like that minimum, and hopefully next year to zero. So this is why I went with Aibidia. This is why we decided to go with Aibidia.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Indeed. So one of the fundamental differentiators that we are working around, and that's part of our vision, is to be end-to-end transfer pricing platform and tax platform. which means that you need to tackle all the problems in one place and then have consistent data across all of your processes. And I think, like you also mentioned, that depending on the position and the size of the company and the your current process, your options are different too, and you may consider different options. And that's why, so we created a few resources here, and you will get the links after the webinar. Guys who are currently on the online. So the first resource that we have created is a roadmap of local file automation. This is a document that gives you the options how to start with this, what are the key steps that Isabella also mentioned about preparing for the automation, considering other options, and seeing different strategies. Because full-scale end-to-end transfer pricing automation is a longer-term perspective for some companies, but it's a burning need for others. But maybe for someone, it's not high on the agenda and you need to really do some more lower level automation. And we don't want everyone to try to build a spaceship from day one. You can gradually build up things. And that's why we created that roadmap, and you will get the link to it. And the second resource, I think, Isabel, before we started the webinar, you also mentioned about it, was a local file checklist. So this is just a handy resource that gives you the list of things that you need to ensure you have in your local file, that your local file is properly formatted, and then that way you can ensure the quality and that content meets your expectations, but also requirements. And you'll get the link to that one too. And of course, when you look at that checklist, you will see that, well, if you automate your transfer pricing local file, then many of those points are tackled automatically, because the automation allows you to ensure you have standard and consistent outputs from your process, meaning standard and consistent local files that meet requirements. And that's why I will now want to just have a sneak peek into Aibidia TP-Doc and Aibidia platform to show how you can achieve those things, how you can save time, and how you can do how you can achieve standardization and have visibility and control over your transfer pricing process. So let me share my screen and let's just dive right in to see how that works. All right. So one of the starting points of your transfer pricing compliance process is uploading the financial data and other data of your company, so that you have a central repository of your data and you can then work from there. Here, I'm showing the interface for financial data, for transactional data. This is a typical table which indicates who sells to whom, what transaction refers to, what is the business line, what is the product or service traded, and what are different financial amounts for seller and buyer, or deliverer and recipient. And the way you get this data on the platform depends on the most convenient way that works for you. So one of the ways is you can just copy paste stuff from Excel. That I think is really good functionality, where you don't have a huge data set, but you just need to copy paste a few lines. But alternatively, you also can import data from your Excel in bulk here. So you have a standard Excel file and you upload it and you just get all of the data on the platform. And then, of course, what Isabella earlier mentioned, there is also a possibility for integrating data directly into the platform from your system, which is, of course, a high-level automation, but that's a good option for many companies, especially bigger ones with big data sets. But the goal here is to get your financial data as quick as possible and as convenient as possible on the platform, and that's where Aibidia helps a lot. You know what data you need, you can upload it quickly in various ways, and then you're good to go. So here we have a set of transactions, and then you have transactions, but you don't yet have the methodologies and mappings yet. So that's what we mentioned earlier. This is about having a consistent and standard policies and models on the platform. And then you also have a guided way to provide this data. So for example, let's assume you have a contract manufacturing TP model in APAC region. Then you can assign certain parameters to it, like what is the transaction type? Is it sale of tangible property, or is it service? What is the main function or contribution? And then you can describe this model in text, and then you can even embed images and pictures of your transaction, if that's something that helps for the context. Once you provided the name and created the TP model, you can assign standard functional profile to it. So let's assume you have this contract manufacturing, and then you would go and provide functions, risks, and assets for the manufacturer, for a seller, standard seller, and a standard buyer for this transaction. This way, you have now one consistent functional analysis that you can use across various transactions in your group. And then similarly, you would also assign transfer pricing methods and methodologies. And this way, you have now a standard information and standard model and standard pieces of text that will be used across your group. And then if you will need to change something, you will go and change it in just one place, and then it will go and be updated across all of your documentation or all of the other data points that are impacted. How is this possible? So the answer to this is mapping. So what do you do? So you have now this contract manufacturing transfer pricing model. And then what you do, you indicate from the transaction list that we have provided what transactions this TP model refers to. So we have APAC contract manufacturing, and let's assume that India is a contract manufacturer which sells to UK, Finland, and France. We would then select those transactions. And this way, the solution now knows that there is a set of transactions, and then there is a set of legal entities that perform those transactions. And then there is a set of TP methodologies, in this case, contract manufacturing. And by combining those together, it now knows everything it needs to know about your transactions, your transfer pricing methodologies. It knows what functional analysis to apply and what TP method to apply. And this way, you ensure the consistent picture, but also it all clicks like a puzzle. And then if you need to change something, you change it just in one place. Isabella earlier mentioned that data gathering is still something that you continuously do one way or another. And the way you do it is by inviting other people to the platform and then providing certain data points. Of course, longer term goal is to have the full automation of integrating the data directly here without even people needing to go here. But sometimes, especially for business related data, like very qualitative type of data, like functional analysis details, you would still need someone to access it. Or, for example, business description of particular legal entity, if that's something that you want to include in your local file in detail, something that the point where you may want to involve like local controller and give them access to update their legal entities descriptions. And for this purpose, we have a set of analytics workflow dashboards that allow you to track, as a central in-house transfer pricing manager, allow you to track all of the data and the status of data gathering. So you would have here a set of legal entities that you are covering in or that your group has, and then you would see what is the status of different data that is required for a local file. Like, let's say in Canada, there is some data that is still not provided, and then the total completion status of the data gathering is 50%. And this way you can ensure that you have a full visibility and control over your data gathering process. And the same way, you can also look into your actual local file status. So entity data is one thing, but then local file is a little bit different, right? You have a set of companies, and then you have to generate local files or create local files or prepare everything for creating local files at a particular point of time. That's why we have this local file status dashboard that helps in-house teams to have a full visibility and control over their transfer pricing compliance, where you would have a list of your legal entities, and then you would have a status of your local file completion on the platform, but also you would know what is the local file deadline in this particular country, because some countries do have deadlines, some countries don't. and you want to know that without reading all the local legislation or being updated all the time. That's something that Aibidia does for you. So you know when you need to have the deadline, you know how many days you will have in case of deadline, in case of request from tax authorities. And you will also know if it is required to actually submit local files, or you just need to have them ready and submit only on request basis, because there are different countries with different regulations. But once you have all of your data and you're ready to generate local files, because, well, that's the way you want to have it. You want to have actual Word documents every time you're ready, or maybe some tax authorities request is coming in, you're going to create TP documentation. And that's where you can mass generate those local files. So you have a list of your legal entities, and then you can create documentation in bulk. So you can just say, okay, so I have UK, Singapore, and India, and Germany. And then I would just click on those 4 documents. And then what it will do, it will combine all of the data that we currently have on the platform with the template and with standard layout and standard structure. And it will also include attachments like benchmarking studies, like intercompany agreements that you have provided. And it will create readily made local file documents for you that you can use in your while submitting to tax authorities, or to store that on your SharePoint. And that will be editable Word documents that all look the same and will follow the standard layout that complies with OECD requirements. Let me just share. So here I'm just showing how that local file would look like. This is a Word editable document. So if you just still want to have some final modifications, you can still do it. But the layout always follows the standard OECD requirements. And then throughout this document, all of the data that you have provided is included in that document. And this data is consistent across all local files. So what Isabella was mentioning about how do I ensure that Spain and Germany, when describing the same business model, will present the same facts. So that's what this allows you doing. For example, here we have a summary of intercompany transactions for contract manufacturing, where India sells something to Germany, and that's exactly the piece that will be the same in Indian local file, but also any local file which involves contract manufacturing with India. So this way we ensure the data is consistent and it's always presented in structured and organized way, and the data is reused as much as possible. And we can even generate master file using the same data. So that's something I will not be showing, but that works exactly the same way. So to summarize, what we've got here is a platform that can save you a lot of time, where instead of you going back and forth and gathering the data, then being the intermediary between advisors and someone who helps you in the group, you actually have this all on one platform, and then creating any additional local file will be taking just a few, maybe half an hour to an hour, just to add additional data about this particular transaction and then click on generate. This way we save a lot of time, and then you also can streamline your communication and focus your advisors on what really brings value, what really makes sense, instead of them doing this low-level drafting of documents. Of course, central visibility and control is something very crucial for in-house teams. You want to know what's the status of your local files, what is required where, and this way, using our dashboards and analytics, you can have the full overview and visibility and control over what's going on with your transfer pricing compliance. And on this note, I think it's a good point to also discuss what can come next. And Isabella, you mentioned a few other things that you were considering, or what do you think will be the future of your road to digitalization? But maybe let's talk about that a little bit more. So what do you think will be next steps for you in terms of expanding the digitalization?
So, as I already mentioned, the fully automatization of our transfer price documentation. So, really, the connection between our ERP system and our other data point with the Aibidia platform. This is the first and the most important part. And also, the extending our work with Aibidia on Pillar 2 and CBCR reporting as doing everything in one platform give me the compliance, the awareness that everything tells the same story, the data is consistent. I have different kind of checks built into the system that notifies me when I do something wrong or the data is not consistent, where something falls apart. So those three most important things are the plan for next year, and we will definitely do the next steps with Aibidia.
Great, thank you. I think especially with the expansion of new requirements like Pillar 2 and public CBCR even, you really need to have a consistent story, and then having all the data reused as much as possible will probably be something that most of tax teams will want to do instead of collecting isolated pieces of information for every process. Well, Isabella, thank you very much for providing all your insights, and it was great to talk to you. But we are not finishing yet, so what we will now do, we will go to the Q&A session and answer any questions that our attendees may have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, again. I'm waiting for Isabella to rejoin. But in the meantime, I will start answering some of more specific questions about Aibidia product. There was one question that we didn't answer from Lee, which was about accounting consulting firm view, whether this solution is helpful to prepare local files for many clients at the same time. And the answer to this question is it depends. So if you really have individual local files for 100 clients and there is no repetition in terms of transfer pricing models or benchmarking studies, etc., then you're essentially preparing a set of very customized local files. In this case, this solution or any other automation essentially at this point, apart from AI-driven solutions, will not be extremely helpful for you. However, if you have clients that have a lot of local files and you support them, that's where you need to look into the automation. So repetitive pieces that you're using can indicate that there is an option for you to consider this platform. Another question was about localization from Geert. Maybe Isabella, if you can just recap how you're tackling your localization, because I think there was another question on that. And what's your plan in case you have requests locally? And then I will elaborate a little bit on the functionality of the platform.
So the first and most important part is that Aibidia provides like the template that have like the mandatory parts that are required in the local files. So you have to fulfill it, and with that you assure that everything is what is really required locally is also provided by the transfer price documentation by the local files. Then you have like information boxes where you have like mandatory and optional information that needs to be provided. As already mentioned, we are providing everything in English, as this is our mother language, and the whole documentation is in English language. If there are specific requirements like in transfer price documentation local language, we always have the tax authorities always gives like time for answer for providing the documentation, and this is the time where we are giving it to the translator and translate it. if there are any extra documents needed, there is also possibility to attach, like to make an attachment or to just modify separate local files to improve the compliance on the local level.
Yep. Thank you. And in terms of the technology itself, so there is a localization feature which lists all of the countries where your group is present with an indication if this country requires something additional or something different from the OECD guidelines. And therefore, that's your list of what is different. And then you can, from there, modify your local files to ensure, and it also provides information about like what you need to customize. So this way you can see the list of things that are custom, that needs customization and therefore were customized. And then Anna, I think we answered your question probably too. So yes, you can prepare locally compliant local files. Of course, there are some very nuanced countries like Brazil, obviously before OECD implementation, that require different reporting requirements, but most of the countries you can cover with this. Nicholas was asking about functional analysis evaluation, automated questionnaire or confirmation sheet. So there is a set of functions, assets, and risks per contribution or per main role of the entity, which you are filling in based on particular transaction. So this way you can say that this is a questionnaire or confirmation sheet or confirmation matrix that you verify and provide information in more details. But if you need like more specific questionnaire for a particular transaction, there are also some solutions for that, and we can discuss that that cooperate with Aibidia, like arm's length AI. Adam asks if how Aibidia handles USA documentation requirements. So this is a more specific question about local requirements that we have briefly discussed. So there is a instruction on how you comply with US requirements with Aibidia, which lists particular changes you need to make to your OECD documentation in the platform and explains how you do it. That's the way we handle it now. But we're also working on building more specific features around this. And the same for, yes, please.
And honestly, the US documentation requirements are not that different from the OECD one, so it's pretty easy to handle. And if you follow the guideline and have all the checks and check your boxes by every type of transaction that you provide all the information, it's pretty easy to follow the requirements also.
Exactly. I think it depends on the strategy that companies take. I think when I worked for a big multinational, what we've done, we had a checklist basically at the end of every local file where we said those locally required features are covered. It doesn't mean that they are covered in particular order that is locally like listed in the legislation, but we feel comfortable that if they are covered, that the file is compliant. I think that's what Isabel, you meant. And Igor, your question was about India. So that's the same answer as the US. So there is a section which explains in particular instruction how to prepare compliant documentation for India using Aibidia. That is called localization, and it indicates all of the deviations that you need to take into account while preparing this documentation or providing particular data points. Anna, your question about different modules that are included. So value chain and restructuring. So some of those pieces that you have seen in the demo that I was giving were around preparation of master file too, because our solution also prepares a local file and master file at the same time, and therefore, for example, value chain is more traditional you would see in the master file. But that's if we're talking about TPDoc. There is a more specialized solution which is called value chain analysis in Aibidia, which focuses on preparation of value chain. And there are other solutions which tackle particular problems like country by country report, operational transfer pricing, pillar 2, financial transactions, and those are more specialized solutions. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, let us know. We're happy to have a more detailed discussion. Thank you. I think, yeah, the rest of the questions, I guess we answered in the chat bot. So I hope everyone have heard the answers. But if not, we are happy to reconnect and have a more detailed conversation with you. Just drop us an email or book a demo, and we will be happy to take it from there. I would like to thank Isabella once again. A lot of interesting insights. It's always great to hear from someone who works in-house, like what your actual problems are and how you approach different things. So thank you once again.
Thank you for letting me be part of it.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for active participation. You will receive the recording and other useful materials after the webinar. Thank you and bye for now. Bye-bye.